It was late in the afternoon when the air around the quiet neighborhood seemed heavy with tension. The sun cast long shadows across the ranch, a place that had always been more than just land. It was freedom, hard work, and a dream that had finally taken shape. The man who owned it was proud, not because it was big or flashy, but because it was his. He had fought to keep it alive, pouring sweat and years of effort into every corner. But that day, as he walked up the dirt path to his front door, an envelope taped to the wooden frame caught his eye. The bold letters across the paper carried a sting that froze him where he stood. It was from the Homeowners Association. Inside was a notice that demanded something no one could ever expect. He had just 72 hours to sell his ranch. 3 days. That was all they gave him. The words burned in his mind. He unfolded the letter again and again, making sure he had read it right. The paper spoke with authority, but behind its official tone was a threat, sharp and unfair. For years he had known that some neighbors didn't like him there. They whispered, they complained, they tried to push him out in small ways. But this was different. This was war. His chest tightened as he thought of everything at stake. The land was more than soil and grass. It was history, it was his safe place. It was the symbol of every boundary he had broken just to stand there as the owner. The HOA had picked the wrong man to corner. Instead of panic, something else rose inside him. His jaw set, his eyes sharpened. If they wanted to test his strength, they were about to see it in full. The rancher didn't crumble under pressure. He didn't bow when someone told him to leave. He had learned too many times in life that the only way to survive was to fight back smarter than the people who tried to break him. This was no exception. He stood on his porch that evening, holding the letter, watching the sun sink lower behind the hills. And in that moment, a decision formed in his mind. A plan that would not only protect his ranch, but turn the tables in a way no one saw coming. The night felt long, but his mind was clear. He knew that if he reacted with fear, they would win. That was what the notice was designed to do, scare him into selling quickly, under pressure, without a fight. But he wasn't a man who folded when pushed. He began thinking of the very system that the HOA relied on, the rules and agreements they used to control others. If they could use those rules to threaten him, then maybe he could use them too, but in his own way. He pulled out old documents, checked property records, and went through the fine print that most people never bothered to read. Hours passed, papers scattered across the table, until finally a quiet smile spread across his face. He had found something powerful. The ranch wasn't just a home. It was land that included spaces the HOA rented for their own use, spaces they had taken for granted for years. They depended on those spots, and without them, their neat little system would crack. That was the weakness. That was where he could strike back. By the time the sun came up, his decision was made. Instead of bending, he would push harder. Instead of leaving, he would stay. And instead of losing, he would make sure they felt what it was like to be under pressure. He drafted new rental terms, bold and undeniable. The price they had once paid would no longer exist. Overnight, it would triple. Not tomorrow, not next week, immediately. If they thought they could corner him with a 72-hour deadline, he would show them what it felt like to be trapped with no way out. His hands didn't shake as he signed the papers. There was no doubt, no hesitation. When he walked into the HOA office, every eye turned toward him. They expected resistance, maybe even begging. But what they got was a man calm, confident, and holding the power they thought they had taken away. He placed the documents on the desk, leaned in, and let them read the new terms. Silence filled the room, a silence heavy with disbelief. The numbers were there, written in black ink, undeniable. Rent had tripled. The shock rippled across their faces, the same way it had hit him when he first saw their notice. But this time he was the one in control. The room felt smaller with every second that passed. They shuffled through the papers again and again, hoping they had read it wrong, but the numbers did not change. triple rent due immediately, backed by the same rules they had tried to use against him. The very system they thought made them untouchable had turned against them. A few voices rose in protest, sharp and defensive, but he stood firm. His presence was steady, his silence louder than their anger. Every word they spoke carried less weight because deep down they knew the truth. They had underestimated him. What they thought would be an easy victory had become a battle they were losing fast. For years they had relied on intimidation, small tactics that worked on others who couldn't afford the fight. But now they were facing a man who not only resisted but outsmarted them. Each line in that contract was a reminder that he had read the rules more carefully than they ever expected. Outside, the ranch stood quiet, untouched by the chaos. The open land, the steady fences, the sky stretching wide. It all seemed stronger now, as if the ground itself stood with him. Neighbors began to whisper, word spreading quickly that the HOA had been forced to swallow their own medicine. The story carried a certain power, one that could not be contained within office walls. For some, it was shocking. For others, it was inspiring. But for him, it was simply survival. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't crave attention. All he wanted was to keep what was his, and to remind anyone who tried to take it that he would never be an easy target. As he walked back across the gravel path, the same letter that once felt like a threat now seemed like nothing more than a piece of paper. The HOA's deadline had no meaning anymore. The ranch remained his, and with one bold, days soon transformed into weeks. And even the initial shock of the rancher's unexpected move had not yet faded. The HOA members, who previously exhibited self-sufficient confidence, found it increasingly difficult to maintain eye contact when they encountered him. Deep down, they knew that they had failed to subdue his opponent, and they could not find a way to mitigate the outcome. Unavoidably, the new rent remained in place, as they required those spaces even more than they liked to acknowledge. Each instance of payment arrival served as a subtle reminder of their unsuccessful endeavor to displace him. The neighborhood became a centralized hub for sharing the rancher's story, both good and bad. Word spreads even beyond the immediate neighborhood, reaching out to neighboring towns and sparking interest from people who lived nearby. Curiosity about what the rancher accomplished against the influence of the powerful HOA board was triggered, and it spread like wildfire from a single coffee table discussion to an unending series of late-night conversations. By not focusing solely on a personal conflict between one man and one ranch, but expanding the narrative to enlist an entire town, the tale of courage gained traction, evolving into a powerful symbol of perseverance, transforming fear into unwavering strength, and demonstrating the determination to refuse to surrender when the odds seemed nearly insurmountable. Despite facing all these challenges with steadfast resilience, he remained completely true to himself. The rancher continued to walk the same sturdy paths, daily tending to his animals and rising before the sun to diligently exercise the land. However, the profound difference was almost invisible at first, yet it lingered heavily in the air. He no longer felt the burdens of anticipating the next impending attack. Instead, our protagonist now carried the silent glory of successfully facing adversity, having successfully conquered fear. This victory surfaced as a quiet testament to his resilience, demonstrating his unwavering strength, courage, and wisdom when confronting adversity with an impartial mind and an unyielding heart. As the last sunbeam slowly dipped behind the hills, he stood at his porch, watching the sky take on a radiant, fiery hue. The expansive fields stretched out before him, seemingly unchanging, peaceful, and beyond human touch. The story that initially began with a simple resolution, driven by the HOA, transformed into a lasting legend. never to be forgotten by any person in that town.